So for those of you that just joining, I've disabled the waiting room, so hopefully you can join and listen and hear me and see the screen. I'm CJ if you haven't met me before. What I'd love to see as we get started, as people are joining, if you want to put down where you're joining from and what you're hoping to get out of the session in the chat, that might be a really cool way to meet each other. There's not a lot of people that have joined yet, so I'd love to know where folks are joining from if you're comfortable sharing that. Um, Also, while we are waiting for folks to join, if you have an opportunity to go to zooniverse.org, which is again linked in the slides, and register yourself for an account, that's a really great first step. As someone who is a educator or a teacher, it'll be easier for you to use Zooniverse and help your students use Zooniverse if you have an account. If you want to see how it works first, that's also totally fine. We'll follow along together. All right, so as folks are adding um, where they're joining in from and maybe what they're hoping to gain out of the session, I'll do a little bit of our general introduction pieces. So if this is your first training with Discover the Universe, welcome. I'm really excited that you're here. What we do is offer astronomy training to formal teachers, informal educators, folks that are passionate about teaching and leading education in astronomy across Canada. We offer it in English and French and sometimes other languages if we can, coast to coast to coast all across the country. And you typically online and free, although we are starting to build up some in-person events. So definitely check out our website if you want to see if we're coming to a location near you. We do workshops and webinars, which you're part of today. Classroom-ready resources is available on our website through asynchronous resources. And then we also do hands-on teacher training, especially in that in-person stuff that I mentioned. So if you haven't had an opportunity to check out our full resources and website, definitely check that out after this webinar too. So the goal of this workshop is a little different, as I mentioned. Zooniverse is not a Discover the Universe resource. It's something that we've often talked about, and if you've been with any of our sessions before, you may have heard us mention Zooniverse as a great resource for teachers. So we're really excited this year to be able to offer official Zooniverse training. I went through the training to be an ambassador over the course of the fall and over the course of the fall. No, I don't think there was training in January. Um, and so we're happy to offer this to you so that you can say you've been officially Zooniverse trained. And if you stick around till the end of the training session, you will get a certificate. So something a little nice to add to your resume or to say, I did an hour of PD, um, which is pretty cool. So the goal for this one is to give you the training so that you know what the tools and resources are associated with Zooniverse in particular to engage your students or wider communities. There's nothing saying you can't show this to to other teachers in your network or other educators in your network directly in real research, and that includes global research events. And we're going to showcase some of them, test out a couple of them, but I really encourage you after the webinar to go and look at all the cool projects and all the things that are coming into Zooniverse because there's new projects being ramped up all the time. So Zooniverse has a couple of sponsoring institutions. So who are they? It's the International Astronomical Union Office of Astronomy for Development. So particularly the North American Regional Office supports this sort of training, and the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. So you have some links there that you can definitely explore and have a look at. But they're part of the larger Zooniverse group and family that offer the platform, all the projects that it goes through, and then the ambassador training. So what we're going to cover today for you guys is what is Zooniverse. I keep saying it, but I haven't told you what it is yet. So we're going to do an example of what using it looks like in practice, and then kind of open it up for questions, see if anyone's having any issues anywhere. I'll tell you how you can kind of share your stories and your students' stories and the research that they end up contributing to with the global community. What I really like about the Zooniverse community is that they are very engaged with promoting student stories, either students that are participating in the research and or the researchers that end up moving forward their projects and cutting edge research because of the commitment of the community. So that's both of those things are great. And then how to engage in some of these larger events that you might want to do for a particularly themed week or month with your students. All right, so what is Zooniverse? We're going to watch this video together. I'm hoping that sound will come through. Do we hear the music?
To the Zooniverse. The way we generate knowledge has changed a lot over the last century. Technological advances are creating huge amounts of data that can be hard for researchers to handle by themselves. The Zooniverse is an online platform that connects these struggling researchers with people all around the world who want to help. Together, these volunteers have contributed to many incredible discoveries and a huge amount of wonderful science, such as helping to sift through 1 million images of galaxies in the first project, Galaxy Zoo. Not only did this help to create the most comprehensive survey of galaxies, having so many eyes look at each single data point led to many unexpected discoveries, including a new class of galaxy that appeared as small green blobs, or as the volunteers called them, Ps. The Zooniverse has since grown to include over 150 different research projects across all sorts of subject areas and scales, from the stellar to the subcellular and everything else in between. All of this is possible because of a community of nearly 2 million volunteers around the globe who together are changing the way that modern research is done. Why don't you explore the Zooniverse today?
All right, so that's a really nice kind of intro video. I decided to include it because obviously they had done a lot of really hard work with these paper cutouts and the animation. And it also does give a really nice summary of the kind of goal of Zooniverse and the connections that can be made within it. Um, oh no, we're not going to play it again. Here we go. So I do want to hone in on a couple of things that were mentioned there that I think are particularly interesting. So the first project was Galaxy Zoo in 2007, and they mentioned like that not only helped with the classification of galaxies, but also leads to new discoveries because when we'll actually go through Galaxy Zoo specifically, because I don't know if that project will ever end. There's so many galaxies to categorize. But as they were going through and volunteers were able to say, this doesn't fit with the criteria that the researcher has provided me. And that happens enough times that volunteers are able to work with the research to say, these are the different characteristics we see. And then it, led to new discoveries. I think a really interesting point about the green pea galaxy is those are really cute galaxies. If you've never gone and looked at them, they have some really interesting structures and the way that they come about. They're actually the only astronomical object I did a paper on in my undergrad. So that one had a particular pull on my heart because they were the first thing that I really did seriously in terms of looking at astronomy data. So I really love that. That was cool. Um, there are over 500 projects, and when they say 500 plus, it is because new projects are being added literally all of the time. We are preparing for another workshop in April that'll be in person in Toronto for those that got that newsletter earlier today. Those that are in Toronto in person, and we are currently talking with what are we going to be presenting. And we know that some of the researchers that we work with at Dunlap are actively contributing to Zooniverse and will have even more projects offered that we'll be showcasing at that workshop as well. So researchers that are associated with Discover the Universe and across the world are continuously adding to the projects that are already there and adding new ones, which is really exciting. Um, and so lots of people are involved with helping with these various projects all across not just science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but across all subject areas that you could possibly consider in terms of research areas. It does mostly come back to classifications. However, so a lot of it is citizen science and how can you help researchers, but not necessarily requiring the level of expertise of a researcher, which makes it so accessible. So it is largely about classifying images or helping with transcription data. There can be lots of different kinds of projects that come in. So it might be images that you're looking at, especially for astronomy. It's a lot of image data or data that can be showcased as images. It might be audio, so it might be transcribing audio clips. Same thing with video. And then it could also be raw data, especially for some of the ones that are geared towards older age groups. That one might be a little bit more technical or require a higher level of ability. Um, the way that they're classified is up to the research team on how it's best represented for them. That can include multiple choice. So that's kind of an example you see here. You're choosing out of a set. Can anyone tell me what gravity spy is without going to Zooniverse and looking it up? Does anyone happen to know? You can unmute. What kind of data are we looking at? Does anyone know? I'm also checking the chat to see if that is. And thank you folks for saying where you're calling in from. This is really exciting. All right, no one knows. So Livingston is one of the LIGO detectors. This is gravitational wave data. Um, so yeah, frequency on one side and time on the other. And so what they're asking you to do is say what kind of noise, not maybe not all noise, hopefully it's not noise, hopefully some things are signals. But it's asking you in this multiple choice to say, okay, what does this most look like? So this is pattern recognition for an image. And this person has chosen a blip for this little guy. That kind of makes sense if you look at the other images. Some of the other ones will be, so this one is also multiple choice. This one is a little bit more intense. You're looking at multiple pieces of data. Is it junk or worth looking at again? So a little bit more higher level. Is it just worth looking at? Not necessarily asking for classification, but guidance on what's worth researchers' time, especially if they're going through tons and tons of data. So this is a little bit harder than Galaxy Zoo, but still very much related to galaxy identification and understanding what's going on there. Um, Local group cluster search, so looking for what's going on in the image and where the circles are being drawn. So choosing what kind of object it is. So again, a lot of multiple choice. That's usually what you'll see on Zooniverse in terms of moving through items. This one is really fun. It's a camera snapshots of different areas in Kenya, and they're saying, what am I looking at? Um, and there's all kinds of options you can choose here to say, what is this guy? And so ideally the student would know what kind of animals that you would normally see, but it also is a learning opportunity to say, why do I have this list in the first place? And what kind of animals are native to this area or might be living in this area. Um, you can also use drawings. So this one is saying a box tool. So what they're asking for here is in this image of cells in this particular project, um, draw a box around the immune cells that you can see. So ideally, the student would go in and they'd click and drag. So again, pattern recognition, but a different kind of engagement. Oh, and that was the last example. But there are some other ones, and we're going to showcase one which can be not just multiple choice, free text or drawing, but also transcription. And it could be one question that they need to answer per data point, or it could be multiple. And again, Galaxy Zoo is the example that we're going to use today. And that one requires you to answer multiple questions about each galaxy you see. Because for anyone who's taught, for example, the grade 9 science curriculum in Ontario, you'll know that there's a specific set in the curriculum around galaxy shapes. And so you actually get into all of the bits and pieces and the characteristics of galaxy shapes. I happen to be a teacher in Ontario. That's why I know that one offhand. Right, so this is no sound, but this is an example of what a transcription activity looks like. So again, if you want to share that with some of your colleagues that are in other in other disciplines, in other subject areas, or teaching other subjects, maybe they're teaching English, maybe they're teaching history, maybe they're teaching social sciences, or social studies, or some combination thereof. This might be a cool project to share, or projects kind of in this frame. This one is a popular one. It's actually one of the ones that's really popularized within Zooniverse on letters from enslaved soldiers. So that one is also a great one, pulling on history and then also contributing to research in the area. There's lots of ways to engage with Zooniverse. We're going to be focusing on the desktop version, which I think is probably the richest way to do it. But the students have cell phones, and sometimes that's the best way to engage them, especially if you're going to set competitions or challenges for them to do. They can, in fact, do some of the work on a mobile app. So there's links in there if you'd like to share them too. Not only is there this interaction implicit between the researcher and the student, and then you as the teacher as well, in terms of actually doing the classifications and doing the transcription and doing all of that analysis, there's also an area where you can talk to other volunteers and the research team about the project. And we will move over to Zooniverse here in a few minutes to actually look at all the different aspects, and I'll show you where it is on the platform. But this is a really cool way to really amp up that engagement and showcase that what the students are doing and what the volunteers are doing as people who are helping in these research projects has a really high impact. And the questions you have, if there are issues or concerns, or you think you found something new, um, that should be brought to the researchers, and that's exactly what this talk function is for. It also gives an opportunity for volunteers to help each other, or if you're just learning to get into a project, if it's a harder one or it requires some base level knowledge that's harder to build, this is a great way to build community and also join a community that's already there. All right. So thinking about the impact. Um, So this is not just learning, say doing an activity in an activity book. This is really participating in research and then tying the curriculum or tying other activities that students might be doing or needing to do already um, with something that's very real. This is real research, this is real data, and it's contributing to real discoveries and scientific progression. And I use that term fairly loosely here, that I also include social sciences in that definition. So there's really a lot of impact to be had, both for the research community and for you and your schools and your students. The big one, obviously, is knowledge and skills development. So they're doing pattern recognition and science learning, as well as other kinds of learning, if depending on how much you want to tie in. Um, there's some career pathways, especially through that talk function and learning about the researcher's journey. There's a lot of information about each research project in each of the project pages. So students can also learn a lot about what career progression might be for them. Um, an increased sense of belonging. Um, this is a community, so it's a community within your classroom, it's a community within your school, depending on how much you want to use the platform or use the projects or push it. But then it's also belonging to this larger volunteer community. Again, using the community tools that are in the platform and talking to the researchers is really key. And then an increased understanding of how science works. They are literally participating in the scientific process and cutting edge research. I don't know how you could have it more explicit than to visit a university lab and actually be a research assistant in some of these spaces. Obviously, for pattern recognition and data heavy projects, looks a little different than say lab wet work. But it is definitely an aspect of science and trying to test hypotheses, do classification. These are really big parts of science today, and so it's a really great opening of the door for that. And then, of course, an increased trust in science, because if you know how it works, you're more likely to trust it. The last thing I'll mention here is, and this will be maybe of interest to you, this also counts as service hour certificates. So Zooniverse has really expanded what they're able to offer as benefits to volunteers and especially students. So if students need to have a particular number of volunteer hours or service hours, depending on how your school or jurisdiction defines them or calls them, Zooniverse will actually provide and help and form service hour certificates for students. And most of the time, you can auto-populate them. If you have any issues with them, the Zooniverse team is really open for feedback and then also helping you troubleshoot and problem solve with their platform. So that's also another thing that you can do. It's almost kind of double duty learning, possibly things that are also due in your course, but then also students can either do things outside the course or a part of the course and get service hour certificates for their volunteer hours. If that works for your jurisdiction and your students and your school board, of course. So all of those things, really great impact. Um, let's actually do it. Let's actually jump in and look at Zooniverse and see how it works. So I'm going to stop my share for a second so I can reshare with another window and give you some more links in the chat. There we go. All right, so in the slides, which I've shared, but I'll put them in here again for those that have just joined, and welcome to those that have joined while we were halfway through there. Everything is linked in these slides. You can feel free to go and look at them. But what we're going to be looking at now is this um, activity template. And this will be an opportunity for us to have more of a discussion. I've kind of just given you an overview of Zooniverse and its benefits and some of the nice features it has. As we go through it, I encourage you to use the raise hand function or to unmute and ask questions, because this is really intended to be a discussion and to help facilitate your use of this platform. So don't hesitate to ask questions and stop me. All right, does everyone see that window there? It's says researchers need your help. Yeah. Okay. Um, Thumbs up from Lori. Thank you. So this is in the template document. This document should be available for you to copy. So what I mean by that is you should be able to go to file, even though you might not be able to write in it or leave comments or anything like that. But you should be able to go to make a copy and make a copy into your own Google Drive if you're signed in. If you don't like using Google, you should also be able to download as a Word document, a PDF, an open document, whatever works for you, really. Um, so that you can take this and use it to then create student documents or lesson plans or whatever you need. So this is really material for you. Please feel free to copy and use as you like. So there's a little bit of a blurb on Zooniverse. We already talked about that. Links to some of the things we've seen before. We've already talked about that. And then there's also a template slide deck in here that you can use as a teaching tool with your students. It includes some of the ways that you might introduce your students to Zooniverse. It's got that nice video that we saw earlier, and then it specifically goes into Galaxy Zoo. Um, so it tells you a little bit about the project. The team is global. It includes Oxford and the University of Minnesota and a lot more. And the goal of it is to classify galaxies. There's millions of images classified by hundreds of thousands of volunteers. It is, as I said, what's been presented, the first Zooniverse project, but then also I might argue one of the largest Zooniverse projects as a consequence of that. So lots and lots of stuff there. And then it gives you some uh, steps in order to do. There's a group to join. Don't join this group just yet. This is an example. Um, but we'll go through this here in a second on how you'll set that up. Then they would spend some time classifying. You'd come back and see the impact of the group. Then they do some more classifying, and then they do an impact check and see how fast people did it. And then you might have a handout which asks some specific questions. Um, so maybe tell us every time you complete a certain number, or every time that you have an interesting thing in your galaxy formation. So tell me every time you find a weak bar in a spiral galaxy, asking them to do some recall and thinking through the steps that they do in the project, that sort of thing. So the slide deck there for you to copy as well. So you can likewise go to make a copy, or you can download it, whatever works best for you. Um, a little bit of a note in this document. Um, is that when you're asking students to participate in Zooniverse, they do not need an account. Just saying that. So it's easier for students to track their work, and if they're going to ask for service hour certificates and they want to compare their work with other students, they're going to have to get an account because that's how the tracking happens. But if students uh, do not want to have a registered account, or they don't have parental permission to get an account, because we do need to consider the consent of minors. They don't have to. You can just set your group up to be public, and then they can contribute. They can just contribute on their own and do a bit of an honor-based system, then telling you how many they did and that sort of thing. So they don't need an account to use Zooniverse, but if you're an educator, I would encourage you to sign up for an account so that you can set up this cool tally marketing and creating groups and that sort of thing. So a little bit more stuff about, you know, how Zooniverse works on this front page, and then the actual steps. So we're going to do this together. So zooniverse.org, this is what it looks like. You can explore projects. You can look at some of their statistics. This is the beautiful video again. Looking at researcher impacts, so some of the accounts from researchers who have projects active on the platform. A button here for build a project. So if you're a researcher who wants to use Zooniverse, you can actually go in and do that. And a little bit on what's happening in the community. So some of them were recent blog posts and that sort of thing. So let's actually look at the projects. So there's some featured projects. These change on a regular basis. And then they have all kinds of projects here that you can choose from. So there's things in the arts, biology, climate, history, and more, right? This is a long list in here. But because we're looking at Zooniverse from the angle of Discover the Universe, and we're an astronomy education nonprofit, we'll look at the space ones. Some of these will be cross-listed between other subjects, of course, but there's lots and lots here on space. There's 2 pages even, which is incredible. Um, so that's really cool. And we saw Gravity Zoo earlier. So let's go to, oh, these aren't alphabetical, which is I was hoping for. So let's use instead our search function. So let's say I want to go to Galaxy Zoo. There it is. So I am not logged in. I want you to note that. I have not signed in. I'm not registered. I will do that in a moment. But just to show you what all the stuff you can do without even being signed in so that you can really see that students can engage here. So whenever you go to a project, you can learn more or you can get started. Different projects will have different setups on their pages, but that's usually where it is. There's statistics. There's usually something about the researchers. They might give you other links to external pages like the research group. In this case, Galaxy Zoo, again, it's been open since 2007. They have their own external links for organization and blog because it's quite the project, right? Um, and even with all of that being open since 2007 and having hundreds of thousands of volunteers, it's 6% complete. You can use Galaxy Zoo as your example for the rest of time, as far as I can see it. So feel free to use Galaxy Zoo forever. It's always going to be active. But that said, because there is a progress bar, not all projects will be open forever. So just keep that in mind. If you're asking students to contribute to a project, you might want to check how close is it to completion? If it's 99% to completion, you might want to pick a different one, unless you're just using it for that one class that day. Something like Galaxy Zoo or other projects that are 6% completion and then have like a million classifications, you're good. You're good to use that forever. So let's get started. So this tells us a little bit about Galaxy Zoo. It tells you about the workflow. It gives you some links to what happens next. Lots of pages here for students to look through. Um, but I think the most important part of Galaxy Zoo is they're going to ask a series of questions about the shape of the galaxy to learn more about the galaxy's evolution. Um, and then they tell you a little bit about how this could look. Sometimes there's multiple galaxies, so you want to do the one that's closest to the center. Um, there might be color versions, and it might give you more than one image, so make sure that you look at all of them, things of this nature, and then you say, let's go. So this is a great example of what the projects look like. Again, remember, I'm not signed in. So I can still do this even as a public user, so your students do not need an account. It's easier, however, for you to track their progress and for them to track their own progress. And again, maybe take advantage of those service hour certificates if they do log in and have an account, but parental permission being what it is, you can take that or leave it. So in this one, it's saying Central Galaxy, there's one in the middle here. There are a couple of, look at that P. We're talking about them. And there's the green P right there. Um, so it's what's happening with that central galaxy, what does it look like, and you would choose a multiple choice. So I'm going to say this one is smooth, and then I go next, and this one has multiple questions. So there's a lot of questions in Galaxy 2 to really hone in on what's going on with that galaxy. Um, I'm going to say this one has no disturbances. You might disagree with me. That's okay. Uh, so more than one volunteer assesses each galaxy, by the way. So there is some statistics that goes into the classifications to say who said how many things, and then they kind of look at the most probable outcome for each one. But you can see where this is going. So then are there any features? And just because I know that there's another 10 questions after this, I'm going to leave it here, but it goes through this sort of thing. So there's multiple questions, you pick and choose. There's always an options for nothing unusual. But what I want to focus on as well is some of the things here about above on the project. So this is classify. So I'm in here doing the work. I'm not signed in. I don't have to be. The about page is a little bit about the science. It's a little bit about the site. It's a little bit about that sort of thing. We've got talk, which is what we saw before. So this is how you can actually engage with the researchers and the other participants. So this is some notes. This is not very descriptive. That's a bad example. But welcome to Galaxy Zoo Talk. So there's some sub themes in here so people can actually go in and participate in these comment threads. If you've ever participated in a GitHub project, for example, this really reminds me of ticket comments. I really like the way that it's intuitive and people can answer and you can see who's answering. They tell you whether it's a researcher or a participant. In this case, they have moderators because Galaxy Zoo is so large that they kind of warrant this larger multi-role team. But that's where all this is. And if I was signed in, I would be able to contribute to the discussion. So again, lots of benefits for having an account, but if you don't have parental permission for students to make their own account, they do not need the account to participate. There are a couple of exceptions to that. Some projects are private and they require you to sign in, but very, very few. I've only found like one out of the multiple tens that I've investigated. Okay, so that's the projects, and that's the example of Galaxy Zoo. Um, I think those are the most important features that you can have on Zooniverse as you go through it. Find the project, you can go in and learn more about it, and then students can start classifying instantly, so can you. But then let's actually look at some of the tools that you might want to use as an instructor. So you're going to need to sign in. If you haven't created an account yet, this is a great opportunity to click register and then sign in. So I've already got my stuff loaded in there because I knew I was going to be leading this today. So I'm already logged in. That's great. It's still on the projects page. That's also great. If I click the little icon in the corner, it will bring me back to my dashboard. So this is me. Um, don't worry about the hour classifications. That's fine. So what you're going to do inside your dashboard, you've got lots of things. You can say, how many comments have I made? Have I messaged people back and forth? Have I made a collection of the projects that I really like? So lots of things you can do on your own. That's for your own kind of personal use of Zooniverse, which is fine. But the groups is what we're kind of focusing on today. So if we go back to our activities, we say step one, register in Zooniverse. So that's what I'm encouraging you to go do now. We kind of did a snapshot of what the project looks like, but if you haven't registered, go do it now. Or you can follow along with me and then decide afterwards if you want to register. Next, if you're working on this with students, creating a group is going to be fun. So we're going to create a group together, and I'm going to create one for this session, and you guys can decide to join it if you want. You don't have to. So I'm going to go ahead to create a new group, and this is Zooniverse training, February 5th. And I'm not going to make it private because that would require me to invite you. That would require you to only be able to have people who already have accounts to see that group. And what I want to do instead is make it public. And that might be a good idea to do with your students is making it public, but then to join the group, they would need to have an account. You can then decide if you want to show individual statistics of the members. If you always want to show individual statistics to the public, because this is now a public-facing group, or if you never want to show individual statistics and it's only you as the teacher that get to see that information. So let's say, for example, your students are doing a challenge, but you don't want them to be in competition with each other. You might not, or you only want them to work collaboratively. You might not show them individual statistics at all. Maybe you just want that for your own reference. But if they are in competition with each other, then you probably do want them to be able to see each other's scores. So depends on how you want to set it up and what you're thinking. So I'm going to say yes, show the individual stats because this is a low stakes environment right now. So I've created the group and I am going to share my group in the chat with you. So you can feel free to go ahead and join that group. What will happen is when you go then and do any sort of classification, it'll show up in this group. So we'll do one together. I'm going to go back to projects and I'm going to go Redshift Wrangler because I thought this one was really nifty to show today. 90% complete, totally fine to use. It's not going to close on me in the next 20 minutes. So Redshift Wrangler, and again, you can go to the About page to have a look about it first. This one's set up a little differently. It tells you more about the team and the results and has an FAQ. But it's essentially looking at spectroscopy data to learn a little bit more about the distant galaxies in the early universe. So you're looking for absorption and emission in spectra. If that's not familiar to you, that's totally fine. This is actually a really accessible project to start with. Again, looking at the About page and looking at the help information they provide. It's essentially trying to figure out what molecules and what compounds are actually in the early universe, and the presence of certain molecules or the presence of certain atoms will tell you kind of a little bit about the composition, and it'll tell you maybe a little bit about the time frame. So there's lots of cool information in here. They even have a video, amazing. What they've done so far, they tell you what happens with redshift, um, and then the difference between an absorption line and emission line. So lots of really great learning here. There's like optics that you can see in here, and there's also astronomy learning that you can see in here. They have lots of nice graphics. So this is a great tool, even just the about page, to really go and get your students started on what does redshift mean? How does that make sense in terms of light? How does that make sense in terms of learning about the early universe? But if we go back to classify, this is, and them actually doing the work, this is a great example of drawing. So this is not multiple choice. They actually have to identify something in the page and draw it. Um, so the first task is, do you see any emission or absorption lines? And if I need some help, it'll tell you what to do. So you're looking for peaks and troughs in the graph. And if there's something wrong with the graph, let us know. That's essentially what this guy says. So in this one, this is the main graph, and then they've got cutouts for the different wavelengths. Um, yeah, I think I see a few. So I'm going to say, you could say I think there's something wrong. Can't find anything, or I've spotted something. So I'm going to say I spotted something, and then it tells me to mark them. So there's a little crosshairs now on my cursor. And I'm going to go in and say this is where I found absorption and emission lines. So I think this one, and I'm going to try and draw that rectangle as narrow as possible because that's going to help the researchers a little bit more. But they know it's volunteer based, so it's okay if you don't get it exact. So I've drawn one, and I think that this one is probably one too, or I can only draw one. Okay. All right, so there's two. Yeah, okay. So I got a small one here, and then my active one here. I'm going to make this one a little skinnier. There we go. So those are the two that seem the least like noise to me. Again, like you might say that maybe some of these are, I think they look a little bit like noise, so I'm not going to mark them. But if you were looking at this one or you're looking at one on your own screen, feel free to mark what you think is true. And then I'm going to say, you can say done and talk. So if you do that, it brings you to um, so for this one, there's no discussion on it. So this is bringing you back to the talk platform, and it's saying I want to add a tag. So people have created tags for us to say, like, I think this is an emission line or an absorption line. And they've also given you the option of starting a new discussion. So I'm like, I need help. I need this announcement. You know, I'm not going to choose any of these other ones because I'm not a moderator and I feel like that'd be weird, but I might say like, this is a note about this guy or this is help. Those are probably the two that I would choose. So instead what I'm going to do, um, okay, I pressed done. So done and talk means I'm finished that one, and now I would go back and do more. Instead, what I'm going to do is go back to my dashboard. So now, if I go to my group, so this is an example, we did another project, but what I was really trying to show to you is the groups. So in my group, there's been one classification, me. It was in Redshift Wrangler, which is the project I just did. And now what I can show you for groups, which I think is really cool, is you can look at it based on the number of classifications, or you can look at it based on the amount of time. So up to you on how you want to set challenges or criteria, but you can do it either way. You can then also do a drop down of the project. So if there was multiple projects here, you could choose more than one. So this time it's just Redshift Wrangler, it's the same data. And then you can also provide a time limit to when you want that data to be seen. So like you're not interested in knowing what your students did a month ago, you're interested in what they did in the last week, or you can set a custom, whatever makes sense for the particular project you're offering or challenge or group activity. Um, so that's how groups work. So I want to take a pause here before going back to the activity template and ask, we've looked at the projects, we've seen a couple of different examples, we've seen a couple of different examples of how Zooniverse works. We've looked at the talk function, we've looked at the how do you get an account and how do you set up a group. Does anyone have any questions at this point on using the platform or exploring the platform? Um, or the content on the platform? Lori, yeah. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry.
There you
Um,
go.
if you were doing this with a group, with one class, just say you're just doing this with one class, would
Yep.
you have them just doing one of the projects at the same time?
You could, but what's fun about the groups is that once you join a group, all of the classifications you do count in the groups. So, for example, I also did some test runs called test and test one. And so if I go into those, all of my classifications that I've done since I created them are logged here. And that's where this filtering function becomes helpful. So if you're saying I'm creating this group for my class, and today
Hmm.
we're focusing on Redshift Wrangler, for example,
Right. Yeah.
then you would say, okay, guys, we're going to restrict the time that I'm looking at your submissions to today, right? Like maybe you're just saying I want it to be
Okay.
today. And then I'm also going to restrict it to the project that we're doing right now. Go ahead and do as many as you can in the next 40 minutes. And then you with those two kind of filters set, you'd be able to pull out what they're doing. Um, so you can't unfortunately set a group for a particular project, but with that filtering function, you can at least you can then pull out that information or set it that way.
Okay. So you can't actually find out, like you can't actually have them working only on one project. They could be doing other things at the same time.
It could be, but again, when you filter and say, okay, we were supposed to be working on Redshift Wrangler this whole time, and half of them don't have any contributions on Redshift Wrangler, then you know they didn't do the work. So
Yes, okay. Okay.
yeah,
So you have to kind of monitor that to figure it out. Okay, thank you.
no problem. That is actually one of the feedback pieces I'd like to give Zooniverse is it'd be cool to set up groups based on project, but what I'll also say is groups are a relatively new function. And up until a couple of months ago, it was only for Galaxy Zoo. So they've really come a long way with this feature, but that's one of the pieces of feedback I'm going to be giving them is it'd be nice to set groups per project, and not have to rely on the filtering. So yeah, unfortunately that's not it, but you can. Um, yeah, so that's kind of how the groups work. Any other questions about groups or the Zooniverse platform so far? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat and I don't see any other hands. So we'll continue with the template here. Um, And we kind of talked through some of these. So ideally, you would have your students register on Zoom so they can actually join the group. If they don't have parental permission to have an account or that's not possible for another reason, they don't need an account to actually participate in the classification and the learning. The groups are just really helpful to have that aspect of tracking the classifications they do, being able to get those service hour certificates, joining in on challenges, whether that's collaborative or competitive. So that's the benefit of the groups, but if they can't do it, it doesn't prevent any of the other excellent benefits of using Zooniverse. You can then invite your students, so then you can copy the link and send it to them, QR codes, all of those great things. And then you can actually create your challenges. So that might be um, setting a class goal or setting a goal per student, completely up to you how you want to set that. And then you can and then you can share your stats, celebrate their work, and then continue the collaboration. This is some more additional information about to show or not to show statistics. That's up to you. We kind of covered that earlier. Okay, so that's the sample activity. Those are the instructions. And this is a template you can take. And again, you can go file, make a copy or download to reuse and make it set up for the project or the competition or the challenge that you'd like to showcase. So continuing with this part here, I do want to talk a little bit more about um, some of the things you can do with Zooniverse after that. So I'm not going to go back into full slideshow. So you're going to see a little bar at the top here, but I'm hoping that because we're going to do some more flipping back and forth between tabs. So we've done this, we've gone through the educator guide. And now there's the second part of this is how it works in your classroom, this is how it works individually, but also how do you can also do this amplification of student work and being more a part of the global community that does citizen science with Zooniverse. So you can share your impact with Zooniverse communications themselves. You might remember on the website, um, oh, that they had a like a blog. So they have publications and they've also got a blog here too, which I can't find at this moment, I think because I'm signed in. So if I sign out, and I go back here, here we go. So they do also have a blog and publication. So what's happening, the Daily Zooniverse, they post things here. You can actually submit things for them to talk about, or they'll take pieces of your suggestion and add it there. So there's a Google form embedded in the slides there for you, and it'll become of the Daily Zooniverse post, which is then also shared on social media. So there's lots of there's that way that's very direct on how do you share impact. That could be celebrating your class for achieving a goal that you've set together, or that could be something about how Zooniverse has impacted your teaching, whatever you feel you'd like to share there. And then there's even a larger piece on how do you participate in global events through the projects. And this one is a nice one that's called the International Astronomy Union's 100 Hours of Astronomy. It runs in the fall, but I think it's important to note now because you can start exploring some of the projects and some of the events that happened during October this past year, either for October this year, or start building up towards joining something like this through smaller Zooniverse challenges and projects in the interim. So it is annually in October. There's links in the slides there for you. And essentially what it means is during the 100-hour time period that the IAU sets, because it is over obviously a course of a couple of days, a few days, they would join the Zooniverse 100 Hours group. And you can actually go join that group now, noting that you can be part of more than one. As you can see on my dashboard, I was as well. And it's about achieving a collective impact by reaching a certain number of classifications or engagement with astronomy-specific projects in that group. So any astronomy classifications that happen in during that 100 hours count towards that group if you're a member of it. So that might be a fun way to say, again, for students to join a more global group, not just the group that you set in your classroom, not just the group you set for your school, but one that's actually at a global level and contribute to a real astronomy project directly with volunteers all over the world and help researchers globally too. And again, going back to there's Google Forms that they have there to collect information for their social media and to share that impact. Okay. And so that's the content I really wanted to show to you about Zooniverse, about some of the ways that you can lead activities, some of the aspects of the platform, especially groups, and using the talk function that I think are really helpful for you as teachers, as well as using the content that researchers have really put a lot of effort into on those about pages and those resources pages for the individual projects. There's also a ton of great content there about those specific projects that are helpful for teaching and education purposes. Um, I want to take a pause here to ask if anyone has any larger questions before we kind of go into the next steps pieces. Anything about Zooniverse, astronomy projects on Zooniverse, using it, benefits for you, benefits for students. Feel free to also use the chat or to unmute. Both are totally fine. Any Indigenous topics on Zooniverse? Oh, that's a great question. So I think what you would need to do for that one is think about what kind of topic you would like your students to investigate, and then look at the projects within that subject. So if it's Indigenous history, you would look under history, for example. Um, I don't know that one off the top of my head, but depending on if we have any other questions, I'm totally open to doing a little bit of exploration. But that's what I would suggest first is thinking like um, what kind of indigenous topics you'd like to explore and seeing if they are there under projects. I would doubt that it'd be in the title necessarily because usually the titles are very, very short and not always very descriptive. Um, but that's something you can try. So searching, you can also check for language. There's lots of languages that these projects are in. Oh, that's another piece I meant to share actually too. The projects themselves can be also presented in other languages, including French. So the materials we have today, um, they're not necessarily available in French yet. There is an effort through Zooniverse to create other language options, but the actual platform is available in many other languages, including French. So if you are someone who teaches French courses. Um, but yeah, Jay, that's a great question. So I don't know off the top of my head. I think that's something I would need to investigate and look for. But my first instinct would be, say, if you're looking for history, it would be looking at the history section and then looking in here. Um, yeah, and there's nothing popping out to me immediately. Uh, but that doesn't mean there isn't a piece of that in here either, that there might be Indigenous projects um, that are just not obvious based on the image and the title. But I would need to check that and get back to you. Not sure. Yeah, Jay, go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I teach Indigenous studies in several different forums. Uh, so we have our own star constellations. We don't use the Greek constellations that in Canada we've been accustomed to knowing. So we have the bear, the otter, the salmon, all of these in in those constellations. So I was looking for more things in that nature. Like you look at the
Oh,
Navajo, the Ojibwe, the Lakota, they have their own star knowledge and teachings on the universe. So I was kind of hoping maybe I could, I don't know, tap into that here. I wasn't sure though.
oh, I see. That's a good question. So more about Indigenous astronomy knowledge and knowledge systems. So again, bringing it back to the astronomy piece. I haven't seen any, but that is a really good question. And keep in mind that um, the projects on Zooniverse are ones that are brought forward by researchers. So they're the ones that are data heavy that researchers have identified needing citizen science support for. Um, so I wouldn't be surprised if a project like what you're describing might be one that's in development and just not published yet, or it's one that maybe should be put in development and published. But I don't think there's one on there like that right now. But that's a great suggestion. That's something that I can bring back and see if there might be folks that don't know about Zooniverse that could use it in their research, and then we can see more of that available through the projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Just it's just so hard to find.
Mhm.
There are a few resources on YouTube. If you look on YouTube, there are videos of elders talking about those systems, but I'm always open to more.
No, that's an excellent point. Thank you. Lori, go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to say, does the Astronomy Society of the Pacific have anything that would help out for Jay there? The ASP. I mean, that's another, large organization that is quite reactive, quite reacts quite a bit to First Nations and Indigenous education. So he might want to have a look at that
Yeah.
group.
Thank you.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Thank you, Jay and Lori, for sharing resources and also bringing up important points there. Um, okay, so just realizing that we're getting close to the end of the hour, and there was actually one more thing I wanted to share with you. So this is the end of the content. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to email me, or you can stay for a few minutes afterwards, and I'm happy to do that too. But check out our other events and definitely sign up for more webinars. Because this is a different kind of event than what we normally do, as I've mentioned, um, we are This is officially a Zooniverse training. So those of you that are here, and thank you for being here, you do actually get to walk away with a certificate for having gone through this Zooniverse training and now having learned about Zooniverse, seeing how it's beneficial for your students, going through the process of looking at the platform and learning how it works. You now can say that you are Zooniverse trained, which is exciting. Congratulations. So I'm going to be sharing with you a slide that is your training completion certificate template. And I'll ask you not to share this slide around because it's really only intended for folks that have actually done an hour of Zooniverse training, which you now have. So this is your training certificate. And what I'll ask you to do there, very similar to what I've been saying for some of the other content, you go to File and make a copy, or File and Download, and you can add your own name into your certificate, print a PDF, and you have something to show for this hour of training you've done with me on Zooniverse. If you have any issues with access, please let me know. But I'm hoping that that works for everyone so that I don't have to make or generate a new certificate for everyone. So feel free to go ahead and make a copy and put in your own name and print a PDF. That is yours. You can put it on your resume. You can, I don't know, put it at the end of your email signature if you really wanted. But you are officially Zooniverse trained. And I hope that you have a great time using Zooniverse and exploring its many, many, many projects and the ones that are to come. As I said before, there's a lot in development with Zooniverse as well as it gains in, I would say popularity, because the more that people know about it, the more that researchers will add to it and across disciplines. So enjoy using it. I hope you have a great time. Please feel free to contact me and Discover the Universe at any point if you've got questions about our resources, as well as anything you learned today at Zooniverse. And we will send all of these resources to you in the recap message as well. So again, thank you so much. We are at the end of the hour. If you want to stay behind and do any more chatting, I'm happy to do that. But otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope we see you at another Discover the Universe event soon.
Thank you, CJ. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for attending,
Yeah.
Lori.